Welcome, welcome back to Special News Service Podcast. Tim Scott makes headlines right now when he was talking about race after President Biden's congressional speech yesterday. Senator Tim Scott ripped progressive critics of his Wednesday night rebuttal to President Joe Biden's speech to Congress. Scott trended on Twitter Wednesday night and Thursday morning under the moniker Uncle Tim, a slur suggesting a black man is being overly submissive to white masters. A GOP lawmaker responded to the slur on Fox News on Thursday morning. It's stunning in 2021 that those who speak about ending discrimination want to end it by more discrimination, Scott said. Look at the COVID package. The COVID package itself discriminated against white farmers, he continued. We had the Pickford settlements in the early 90s so that black farmers would be treated fairly by the federal government. Now we're going to reverse that and discriminate against white farmers. Did we not learn the lesson the first time around? I'll just tell you that it's been an amazing morning with so many good people calling, but they have doubled down. They're not going to attack my policies, but they're literally attacking the color of my skin. You cannot step out of your lane according to the liberal elite left, Scott said. And one example of the attacks on Scott since his speech, The View co-host Sonny Hostin claimed that Scott was picked to deliver the GOP rebuttal to Biden because he is black. Why was he chosen to give this rebuttal? He was chosen because he's the only black Republican senator, she said. He is that person. He is the person that Republicans want to put out front because of the problem of racism in the country, and he knows that. So I was sort of disappointed that he was used in this way and didn't take that opportunity to address this type of issue head on. That was a disappointment to me. During his speech, Scott said that America is not a racist country and attacked the identity politics of the left. She said, in part, when America comes together, we made tremendous progress. By powerful forces want to take us apart. 100 years ago, kids in classrooms were taught the color of their skin was their most important characteristic, and if they looked a certain way, they were inferior. Today, kids are being taught that the color of their skin defines them again, and if they look at a certain way, they're an oppressor. From colleges to corporations to our culture, people are making money and gaining power by pretending we haven't made any progress at all, by doubling down to the divisions we worked so hard to heal. You know this stuff is wrong. Hear me clearly. America is not a racist country. It's backwards to fight discrimination when different types of discrimination, and it's wrong to try to use our painful past to dishonestly shut down debates in the present.
And we won't ignore what our intelligence agencies have determined to be the most lethal terrorist threat to the homeland today. White supremacy is terrorism.
America is not a racist country. It's backwards to fight discrimination with different types of discrimination. And it's wrong to try to use our painful past to dishonestly shut down debates in the present.
State revises max mandate after Summit High School runner collapses at finish line, and CDC has their COVID-19 guidelines. So Maggie Williams, a junior on the Summit High School track team, broke a school record in the 800-meter last Thursday. Her moment of glory has been somewhat overshadowed by a moment of concern. Williams passed out as she stumbled her way across the finish line. She and her coach say the mask is to blame, and now the Oregon Health Authority is updating its guidelines. Williams ran the 800-meter race and 2 out, which beat the previous school record that was set back in 2019. I found out in a couple of minutes after my race when I recovered from my fall, Williams told News Channel 21 Monday. So super exciting for me. The fall Williams is referring to happened during the last 7 meters of the race, just as she was about to finish. I felt like I wasn't being able to get a full breath, she said. Multiple times of that happening, not being able to get enough air, I just felt super dizzy, and then eventually passed out. Williams said her lack of oxygen is a result of the mask she'd been required to wear during competition under OHA guidelines for outdoor sports. In the past, this never happened, Williams said. Then the race that I was wearing a mask, and it did happen, which I don't think is a coincidence. Her coach, Dave Turnbull, echoed that belief Monday morning. She just ran a 2:11 in Arizona without a mask on. Turnbull said, 3 seconds faster, from my experience, isn't going to cause a kid to hit the track. When you're in a mask, it certainly does. Turnbull said that after 31 years of experience, he's confident that it wasn't a conditioning issue, it was a mask issue. It was a different response than I've seen for kids that have collapsed to the track just because they were exhausted. He said she wasn't sure where she was. Turnbull told News Channel 21 has considered not letting his athletes run again with the current state guidelines in place. Turnbull and Williams made clear they are not anti-mask, but they wanted OHA to make changes to the policies during competition. We were fortunate that didn't end up in a real serious injury with Maggie. But we shouldn't gamble on the next one, Turnbull said. They and the others spoke out about what happened. And OHA listened, releasing the statement Monday afternoon. The Oregon Health Authority regularly reviews COVID-19 guidance based on medical evidence and evolving science. We're revising the current guidance on the use of masks outdoors during competition. The guidance will allow people to take off face coverings when competing in non-contact sports out and maintaining at least 6 feet of distance from others and the other virus protective protocols. The exception will now apply while training and conditioning for these sports or for competition. The exception will not apply before and after competing. Oregon at present is facing a 4th wave of surging COVID-19 cases and hospitalizations and wider community spread of the virus. Mask wearing has proven to be effective at slowing down the spread, particularly in conjunction with other protective measures such as physical distancing, restrictive gatherings, hand washing, and getting COVID-19 vaccine. As always, OHA will revise guidance as needed to protect public health during the pandemic. News Channel 21 followed up with Turnbull Williams after the announcement, and he called it a win. I feel like we were offering a safe activity of the kids now. He said, meanwhile, women said in the text, I'm very excited that some good came out of the situation. And let's take a look at the video.
Maggie Williams just seconds away from setting the Summit School record in the 800 meter. A moment of glory, overshadowed by this moment of concern. Williams finished in 2 minutes and 8 seconds, collapsing as she crossed the finish line.
I felt like I just wasn't being able to get a full breath, and multiple times of that happening, not being able to get enough air, I just felt super dizzy and then eventually passed out.
Williams blames her lack of oxygen on the mask she's required to wear during competition.
Clearly in the past this has never happened, and then this race that I was wearing a mask, it did happen, which I don't think is a coincidence.
Her coach echoing that belief, saying this was not a conditioning issue, it was a mask issue.
It was a different response than I've seen for kids that have collapsed to the track just because they were exhausted. She wasn't sure where she was.
Have you gotten your COVID-19 vaccine passport? Well, European Union borders will likely open to vaccinated travelers. Eager to travel abroad. Now, bring your COVID-19 vaccine passport. As international travel resumes, the European Union borders will likely open to vaccinated travelers. Some cruise lines and airlines also will require inoculation. As international travel becomes possible again after more than a year of largely staying at home, proving your COVID-19 vaccination status, or maybe just a negative COVID-19 test, will be part of globetrotting. Some countries, most of them were with economies dependent on tourism, or pushing ahead either with vaccine passport plans or allowing vaccinated visitors to skip quarantine requirements for entry. The private sector, most notably cruise lines and airlines, is also eagerly climbing aboard, but the idea is not without controversy. Proving you're vaccinated to travel abroad isn't a new concept. Some countries have required yellow fever vaccines for years, but doing so for COVID-19 would be on a far grander scale than ever before and would present immense logistical challenges. Passport skeptics also predict that it could result in discrimination and fraud, encourage risky behavior in the face of new coronavirus variants, and be a privacy minefield. As the debate continues, here's what we know. The story has been updated with new information. Now, how would this COVID-19 vaccine passport work? Despite its name, vaccine passport or vaccine certificate likely wouldn't be a little booklet you present to immigration officials when you cross on the international border. Rather, the most probable concept is a mobile app with a scannable barcode that shows your vaccination status. The app could also allow you to check entry requirements for a country, and possibly after uploading your itinerary, and hold the status of your last COVID test, and maybe other health information. For people without smartphones, some proponents are pushing for an alternative paper version. Now, the mobile apps in development could verify your vaccination a few ways. Perhaps you could take a photo of paper vaccination certificate, but that method opens the door to possible forgery. A better option would link apps to databases that hold vaccination records. In the U.S., that data is held not at the federal level, but by individual states. Now, is this vaccination passport being used now? Well, not yet, at least on a cross-border basis. But Israel, which is leading the world in vaccination rates, has launched a green passport that gives holders access to places like gyms, theaters, hotels, concerts, and synagogues. New York State has announced an app called Excelsior Pass, which shows your vaccination proof or the results of a negative COVID-19 test. You must also show a photo ID. Now, is there one version of vaccination passport in development? Well, currently a few businesses and organizations are working to create passports. Here's a partial list. One is the International Air Transport Association, a trade group based in Montreal that represents 290 airlines worldwide. The IATA is developing an app called Travel Pass that would let users upload documentation to prove vaccination status. It would also allow passengers to check healthy entry requirements for countries they plan to visit and find COVID testing centers, either before they leave for a trip or upon arrival. Eventually, the travel pass could incorporate biometric information such as a thumbprint or facial recognition to prove a person's identity. Now, the IATA says 23 airlines, including Qantas, Singapore Airlines, Virgin Atlantic, the parent company of British Airways, are testing Travel Pass. The organization says airlines will have the option of integrating the data in their own apps. IBM has a digital health pass which enables organizations to verify health credentials for employees, customers, and visitors entering their site based on criteria specified by the organization. Clear, the registered traveler program that allows you to speed through security at U.S. airports, is pushing its own app health pass feature. It's recently partnered with the Common Project Foundation to collect and manage vaccination records. The Common Project Foundation, working with World Economic Forum, also on its own app, Common Pass, that could link with the iOS and Android health apps. I'll discuss which airlines are using Common Pass a bit later. Other possible apps can include AOK Pass, Passport for COVID, and Corona Pass. Won't it be confusing to have several apps? A lack of standardization would be a burden for everyone. Some apps, for example, could request more information than others or could work in different ways. Another potential problem could be countries and airlines accepting only some apps, forcing you to upload your vaccination records multiple times. We'll have to see how that plays out, but it could be an avenue for governments to step in and sort of out the mess. More of that later. Now, will all vaccines qualify? No, which it could also make things complicated. The European Union has said it will only accept the Pfizer, Moderna, and Johnson & Johnson vaccines for its vaccine certificate plans. Other countries may decide to accept Russia's Sputnik V and China's Sinopharm vaccines as well. Now, which countries will use this vaccine passports? It's a broad coalition which will be pushed now coming from Europe. Popular tourist destinations such as Greece, Portugal, Croatia, Spain, Cyprus are especially eager. On March 1st, EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen tweeted that the EU would present a legislative proposal this month for a digital green pass that would include proof of person that has been vaccinated, has received a negative test result, or has recovered from COVID-19. 2 weeks later, on March 17, the European Commission released a proposal for resuming free travel within the bloc of the EU citizens and residents with green passes, which could be ready by June. At the moment, EU's border remains closed to international visitors, but that will likely change soon. An April 26 interview with the New York Times said that the EU might allow visitors from the US this summer, as long as they've been fully vaccinated. Now, how you prove status, though, it's still under review. Now, outside of the EU, UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson has said his government is reviewing their use. China and Japan also is advocating for vaccine passports, as are the other tourism-dependent countries like Thailand and Aruba. Keep in mind, though, that many countries are still restricting visitors regardless of vaccination status. In many places, including most of Europe, is still under a level 4 do not travel warning for the U.S. government. Removing those barriers will be a completely separate issue. Now, what has the U.S. government said? Well, as part of the January 21st executive order amid curbing the pandemic, President Joe Biden directed his cabinet to assess the feasibility of linking COVID-19 vaccination to the current international certificates of vaccination or prophylaxis used by the WHO. More on that later. It's clear, though, that there will be no national mandate for using them. Now, in a briefing on March 9th, White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki said the private sector would likely drive domestic use of vaccine passports. There are lots of ideas that will come from the private sector and nonprofits. She said, "We will welcome those, but our focus from the federal government is getting more people vaccinated. And that's where we feel we can use our resources best." On April 6th, Psaki said there will be no federal vaccinations database and no federal mandate requiring everyone to obtain a single vaccination credential. Andy Slavin, acting administrator of the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, echoed those comments in the March 29th briefing. "We view this as something as a private sector is doing and will do," he said. "What's important to us, and we're leading an interagency process right now to go through these details, and are some important criteria be met with these credentials. That criteria including equitable access to the passport, such as for people who don't own smartphones, and securing the privacy of user information." Now, how have many places already changed entry requirements for vaccinated travelers? Yes. Iceland was one of the first countries to allow vaccinated visitors to skip testing and quarantine requirements. It's been joined by handful of other countries, including Belize, Croatia, Ecuador, Estonia, Guatemala, Montenegro, and Seychelles. That list will expand. In the U.S., Hawaii is developing a program that will allow travelers who have been vaccinated to skip COVID-19 testing or quarantine. Now, does the U.S. require a COVID vaccination for tourists? Well, though the U.S. already requires negative COVID-19 tests to enter the country, the negative COVID test to enter the country, it does currently not require COVID vaccination. Visitors to the U.S. and returning U.S. residents are not required to be vaccinated against anything, though immigrants must be inoculated for 14 other diseases. Now, where is the pushback coming from? In the U.S., vaccine passports have already emerged as a partisan issue, with Republican elected officials in particular decrying any issue in domestic settings as a violation of personal freedoms. Now, one of the loudest critics have been Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, who issued an executive order April 2nd banning businesses and government agencies in the state from requiring vaccination passports. But that order may run afoul of the cruise industry, a powerful force in the Florida tourism sector. See later section. And around the world, the idea has yet to gain traction in developing countries with less access to the vaccine or with economies not dependent on tourism. Now, what does the World Health Organization say? Through this World Health Organization is exploring how the vaccine passport might work. Now, in February 5th statement, it said, at the present time, the World Health Organization position that national authorities and conveyance operators should not introduce requirements of proof of COVID-19 vaccination for international travel as a condition for the departure or entry, given that there were critical unknowns regarding the efficacy of vaccination on reducing transmission. Now, the World Health Organization confirmed that opinion in a statement published April 19, following an April 15 meeting. While the organization does not recommend that countries require proof of vaccination as a condition of entry, given the limited, although growing, evidence about the performance of vaccines and reducing transmission and persistent inequity in the global vaccine distribution. Now, are cruise lines interested? Well, very much so. Cruise lines are motivated to support the use of vaccine passports, given that cruise ships like Diamond Princess were major coronavirus hotspots when the pandemic began, least recently for other diseases like norovirus. Cruise ships had a very, very difficult problem to solve, said Terry Jones, the founder of Kayak and Travelocity and former CIO of American Airlines. And there is a small microism of a lot of people, and so to get people to feel safe again, it simply makes sense. Royal Caribbean announced on March 1st that it will resume sailing from Israel, that all passengers 16 years and older will have to be vaccinated. It's also announced upcoming cruises from Cyprus and the Bahamas will open only to vaccinated crew and passengers. It's not a stretch to assume that such a mandate will be enforced across all the company's ships. That's the case with Norwegian Cruise Lines, which announced April 6 that all passengers booked on cruises through October 31st will need to be vaccinated. Other cruise lines have followed with varying requirements of their own, including Cunard, Celebrity, Princess, Seabourn, and Viking. Keep in mind, though, the Centers of Disease Control and Prevention are still setting requirements for cruise lines to begin sailing from the U.S. At present, a vaccination requirement for passengers is not among them. Airlines, led by IATA, cruise lines, and others in the travel hospitality industries, are big supporters. Qantas, for example, required visitors to Australia to have a vaccine to fly. Given the country's strict quarantine policy and success in supporting the pandemic, it's not surprising the CEO of Qatar Airways has also said he supports this idea. Among the airlines using Common Pass on a trial basis for select flights are United, Cathay Pacific and JetBlue, Lufthansa, Swiss International, and Virginia Atlantic. There is a big incentive for airlines to endorse the idea of a vaccine passport for international flights. Keep in mind that airlines are responsible for ensuring passengers have the correct documentation to fly to any country before boarding a flight. In a sense, that makes an airline check and desk the equivalent of a border crossing, even if the airline happens to fly someone to a country they can't enter because they're not vaccinated. The carrier is responsible for flying them back home at its own expense. Terry Jones says not unlikely that could happen for domestic flights, though that could change. The president ruled that flights must have masks, so there could be some of that going on. He said, I think it simply makes sense. Now, what are the arguments in favor of vaccine passport? Advocates say that they could bring about long-awaited return to normal life, encourage people to get the shot, which would reduce COVID-19 transmission, better protect frontline workers in the medical, travel, hospitality, and service industries, and everyone else around you, allow countries to fully reopen their economies. The problem, though, is that these reasons aren't perfectly in line. So which will be prioritized? That's something we have to decide. Now, what are the arguments against a vaccine passport? Well, there are a few critical ones here. They could result in inequality and discrimination, not just for the people in developing countries where the vaccine is less available, but for richer countries that have been slower to inoculate their residents. It would also be unfair for communities who are less trustful of vaccines and those who decline the vaccine for religious or cultural reasons. Now, privacy advocates are concerned about the security of apps that will hold private, critical information about users' health. It would be yet another app loaded with personal data that could be vulnerable for hacking or misuse. Now, many app developers counter that they are securing apps through the blockchain technology, which means that the data wouldn't be stored in one place. As the vaccine doesn't bring total immunity, it could bring a false sense of security and lead to risky behavior and the risk of new COVID-19 variants. It's used for everyday activities. It may lead to coercion of vaccines. Now, if I'm not vaccinated, could I get by with a negative COVID test result? Well, that's possible. That would be the case with the EU Green Pass, but we'll have to wait and see whether other countries and businesses adopt such a policy. Now, some countries require vaccines for other diseases like yellow fever. How is this different? A vaccination as a requirement to enter a country is not a new concept. The affected diseases include not just yellow fever, but also meningitis, polio. Travelers could record their shots, prove vaccination status with the World Health Organization International Certificate of Vaccination or prophylaxis, also called a carte-jaune or yellow card, which is vaccine passport, or as Jones put it, this is simply a digital representation of that time's worn idea. Now, COVID-19 is different because it's happening as a vastly wider scale than something like yellow fever. Only a handful of countries, all in the equatorial Africa, require yellow fever vaccination for all travelers. And other countries like China, Australia, South Africa, and Colombia only require if you're arriving from a country with yellow fever risk. Now, the World Health Organization has a comprehensive list of vaccination. Now, why not use a paper passport? Advocates say that there are a few reasons to go digital. Paper passports will be more subject to forgery, be more difficult to replace if lost, stolen, or damaged. It's likely that the border officials will be able to check digital passports quicker than they would paper certificates. That would help at a busy international airports where multiple flights with hundreds of people each can arrive within minutes of each other. Now, once I have one, can I stop wearing a mask, social distance? No. Social distancing and mask wearing are still absolute essential for fighting the spread and the virus of protecting the health of yourself and for others, and it remained that way for many months. Now, this information contained in this article by CNET.com is for education information purposes, not intended for health medical advice. Always consult physician, health provider regarding any questions you may have on medical condition or health objectives. This is, and also on that, next, now the CDC director also came up with their own their COVID-19 guidelines for all to follow. So this graph right here, choosing safer activities. Right here it shows, this is the column on the left, unvaccinated people. The column on the right, fully vaccinated people. If you look at this graph, it shows this. It says safest for unvaccinated people and fully vaccinated people. So if you want to walk, run, roll, bike outdoors with members of your household, fully vaccinated people can do that. Unvaccinated can do that. Attend a small outdoor gathering with fully vaccinated family and friends. That's safe. Attend a small outdoor gathering with fully vaccinated, unvaccinated people. Well, according to this, unvaccinated person is not safe. Fully vaccinated person is. And this is all outdoor. Dine at an outdoor restaurant with friends from multiple households. Fully vaccinated is good. Unvaccinated, not good. Attend a crowded outdoor event like a live performance, parade, or sports event. Fully vaccinated, good. And least safe for the unvaccinated, according to this. The indoor, visit a barber or hair salon. Go to an uncrowded indoor shopping center or museum. Ride public transport with limited occupancy. Attend a small indoor gathering of fully vaccinated, unvaccinated people from multiple households. Go to an indoor movie theater. Attend a full capacity workshop service. Sing an indoor chorus. Eat at an indoor restaurant or bar. Participate in indoor high-intensity exercise class. So even for the fully vaccinated people, they got to wear a mask. Unvaccinated people have to wear masks. The fully vaccinated have to wear masks for when it comes to indoor. Now, Black Lives Matter concerns that Biden is not doing enough for their communities at a great rate, according to the Daily Wire. So BLM blasts Biden, says communities being terrorized at a greater rate than under Trump. That official Black Lives Matter Twitter account blasted President Joe Biden last week for terrorizing minority communities by allowing local police departments to continue buying a surplus and decommissioning military equipment, accusing Biden of selling the equipment to law enforcement at a higher rate than President Donald Trump did. Biden's first 100 days are up in 10 days. Black Lives Matter official account tweeted, "By then, we need him to end 1033, which transfers military equipment into the hands of police across the country, including school and campus police. Another example, the military you see out on your streets ahead of the Chavon verdict. Biden," they continue, "is currently sending more military equipment to our neighborhoods than Trump did. You read that right. Our communities are being terrorized at a greater rate than they had under Trump." The account referenced several cities' efforts to forestall massive unrest if Derek Chauvin, the former Minneapolis police officer accused of killing George Floyd, had been acquitted of Floyd's murder. Cities like Minneapolis, Minnesota, and Chicago, Illinois deployed at a fully contingent of armed vehicles for crowd control in an effort to prevent the kind of looting and destruction that took place following Floyd's death last May. The tweets, though, are also part of a larger effort to shuttered the federal government's law enforcement support office, also known as 1033 program, which allows local and state police departments to purchase tanks and other surplus and decommission military equipment for use in cities. April 30 marks President Biden's 100th day as president. We've got a major demand for him before that deadline. And 1033 Black Lives Matter note on its website. Here's what you need to know. The Law Enforcement Support Office, known as 1033 program, allows the transfer of surplus military-grade equipment to a local law enforcement agency across the country, include school, campus police, too. Over $7 billion has gone to the law enforcement agency since its creation under the Clinton administration. Disappointingly enough, the flow of military equipment to police under the 1033 program has accelerated under the Biden administration. The group noted if we want President Biden to take swift action before its 100th day in office, then we need a lot of voices speaking out right away. Language limiting the 1033 program is included in the George Floyd Justice Policing Act. A racial justice organization had hoped that President Joe Biden would place his restrictions on military equipment transferred through an early executive order, the way President Barack Obama did back in 2015. And President Donald Trump repealed these restrictions with his own executive order in 2017. Biden passed on the opportunity. The Defense Logistics Agency, which tracks the 1033 transfers, does note that military to law enforcement transfers were up in that first quarter of 2021, the first quarter of Biden's presidency, but it did not specify what equipment was being transferred. The most common items sent to police, according to the activists at Police Resistance, were firearm magazines. Also, father teacher slams elite private schools for their obsession with race. The tide may be turning against the woke. In the past 2 weeks, 2 spectacular public letters hit the internet, one from a math teacher in the prestigious Grace Church School in Manhattan. The other from the father of a student at the similarly glitzy Brearley School, also in Manhattan. Simultaneously, anecdotal evidence suggests that parents are showing up in record numbers to public school board meetings across the country. Here's what the dissenters are saying. Paulie Rossi, a scathing public letter titled, "I refuse to stand by while my students are indoctrinated," accuses Great Church School of inducing students via shame the sophistry to identify primarily with their race and requiring teachers like myself to treat students differently on the basis of race. The wildest portion of his 4-page letter, his description of how the school responded after he asked some inconvenient questions during a mandatory whites-only student and faulty Zoom meeting. During the Zoom seminar, facilitators asserted that objectivity, individualism, fear of open conflict, and even a right to comfort were characteristics of white supremacy, causing Rossi to publicly question whether these human attributes, many of them virtues were framed as vices, should be racialized in this way. In the Zoom chat, Rossi also questioned whether it was most defined in terms of racial identity. A few days later, the head of school ordered all high school advisors to read a public reprimand of my conduct out loud to every student in the school, Rossi writes. It was a surreal experience, walking the halls alone, hearing the words of the reprimand emitting from each classroom. His letter also contains chilling passages, including his description of radical student conformity. According to Rossi, dozens of students have privately expressed that in their classes and other discussions, they can never challenge any of these premises of our anti-race teachings. When I attend grade level and all school meetings about race or gender issues, I witness student after student sticking to the narrow script of acceptable responses. Teachers praise insights when they articulate their existing framework. And it is common for teachers to exhort students who remain silent that we really need to hear from you. Now, Rossi recalls a faulty email threat in which staff eagerly suggests officially flagged students also appears resistant to the culture we're trying to establish. Now, when I question what form this resistance takes, examples presented by the colleague, including persisting with the colorblind ideology, suggesting that treat everyone with respect, a belief in mediocrity, and just silence. Now, in one shocking passage, Rossi alleges that an administrator discouraged him from exposing students to his writings from the esteemed professor of economics at Brown University, Glenn Laurie, explicitly because Laurie is black. Now, Laurie, whose nuanced politics are broadly characterized as center-right, has written extensively on racial issues, a perspective which Rossi thought could be enriching for students. Now, according to Rossi, the administrator stated that the moment we are institutionally and culturally does not lend itself to dispassionate discussion and debate, and that mainstream white conservatives are preferable sources for alternate views. Now, according to Rossi, the administration felt that exposure to compelling black conservative perspectives would only confuse or inflame students. Now, in retort, Rossi writes, I find it is self-evidently racist to filter dissemination of the idea based on the race of the person who espouses it. I find the claim that exposing 11th and 12th graders to diverse views on the important societal issue will only confuse them to be characteristic of a fundamentalist religion, not an educational philosophy. Now, according to an interview with Daily Mail, Rossi has been relieved of his teaching duties subsequent to publishing his letter. Just 3 days later, another open letter went viral this time, penned by a father of a middle school student at a Burley school, likewise in Manhattan. In his withering, no-holds-barred critique, Andrew Gutman slammed the school for their cowardly, appalling a lack of leadership and for appeasing an anti-intellectual, illiberal mob when allowing the school to be captured by the same mob. Regardless his decision to withdraw his child from Brawley, Gutman explains, would no longer have confidence that our daughter will receive the quality of education necessary to further her development into critically thinking, responsibly enlightened, and civic-minded adult. Among his litany of objections, Gutman cites primarily Brewerly's obsession with race. I cannot tolerate school that not only judges my daughter by the color of her skin, but encourages and instructs her to prejudge others by theirs. Now, by viewing every element of education, every aspect of history, every facet of society through the lens of skin color and race, we are desecrating the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., utterly violating the movement for which such civil rights leaders believed, fought, and died. Gutman goes on to eviscerate half a dozen sacred cows of the wokeness in rapid succession, launching first into his unvarnished opinions about systemic racism. We have not had systemic racism against the blacks in this country since the civil rights reforms of the 1960s, a period of more than 50 years, he states. To state otherwise is a flat-out misrepresentation of our country's history and adds no understanding to any of today's societal issues. Now, if anything, long-standing and widespread policies such as affirmative action point in precisely the opposite direction. Now, utterly unapologetic, Gutman continues, objecting to Brewerly's vacuous, inappropriate, and fanatical use of words such as equity, diversity, and inclusiveness, insisting that if the administration was genuinely serious about diversity, it would not insist on the indoctrination of its students and their families to a single mindset, most reminiscent of the Chinese Cultural Revolution. Now, next, he moved on to the objections to the anti-racist claptrap infecting academics, Brewerly stating, I object to the gutting of the history, civics, and classical literature curriculums, and the censorship of books that have been taught for generations because they contain dated language potentially offensive to the thin, kind, and hypersensitive. Now, Gutman warns our nation will not survive a generation of leadership even more poorly educated than we have now. Nor will we survive a generation of students taught to hate its own country and despite its history. In his conclusion, Gutman implores fellow parents to speak up, assuring them that his safety in numbers and that the numbers are there. He signs up with a plea to Burley's parents. For the sake of our community, our city, and our country, and most of all, our children, silence is no longer an option. Similar glimpses of the radical dissent are cropping up across the country at local school board meetings with accelerating regularity. On Tuesday, I received a video of a father of two in Dripping Springs, Texas, decrying the trend toward political indoctrination in classrooms, citing critical race theory. The 1619 Project and gender theory audience applause can be heard erupting mid-speech like government rights. Many parents are not on board with the radical encroachment of politics into K-12 classrooms, and they are starting to find their voice. Have you spoken up to your school or workplace? Now, there's a viral video is going around with
You brought up the police in your speech a few times. So what is your main concern? Since, I mean, honestly, the whole reason police, it is systemic. The issue is systemic because the whole reason we have police departments in the first place, where did it stem from? What's our history? Going back to what Jeremy was talking about, what does it stem from? It stems from people in the South wanting to capture runaway slaves.
Maybe they shouldn't be heroes. Maybe they don't belong on a kid's show.
So I disagree with what Jeremy said about it, because I think cops are heroes and they have to have a difficult job, but we have to have that
all of
fine
them?
life. Oh, I'd say a good majority of them. You have bad people in every business and every part.
Yeah,
well,
a lot of police officers have committed atrocious crimes and have gotten away with it and have never been convicted of any of it. And I say this as a person who has family members who are police officers.
Yes, I understand. And this is what I believe. This is my opinion. And this is, not popular to say, but I do support our police, and we have bad people, and the people that do bad things should be brought to justice. I agree with that. But I think that, say it again.
They haven't.
Well, I agree with you on that point of they should, right?
Okay, so what is your bottom line point? You're saying police officers should be revered, viewed as heroes? They belong on TV shows with children?
I think they are heroes in a sense because they come to your need and they come and help you, and they have a problem just like every other business, but we should fix that. But I think that they're heroes. Well, I think
that's the problem. It's looking at it as a business because they're actually supposed to protect and serve the people.
They do protect us. Who do we call when we're in trouble and someone has a knife or a gun?
I wouldn't call the police.
Why wouldn't you call the police?
I don't trust them. My life's in more danger.
Who would you call?
In their presence.
Professor, who would you call?
I wouldn't call anybody.
Well, would you have if someone intruded your house with a gun? What would you have a gun on you, or
no.
Who would you call?
It's my time to go.
Okay.
Well, I'm not going to
If
do
someone already in your house with a gun, there's not much you can do at that point. Calling the police is kind of just,
And I know that it's not popular for me to say that to you guys and people in here, but that's what I believe about the police.
Okay.
And,
thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you guys for listening to my point. I appreciate it. Thanks.
I will say, yeah, I'm glad you did say that, even if I disagree with you. It's important that.
And we should fight for the right for people to say things that we don't even like, right?
I may not agree with what you say, but I'll fight for your right to say it.
Amen.
Okay, so that was a professor at Cypress College in Southern California berated a student during a Zoom class for calling the police heroes. Now, during communication class, Braden Ellis gave a presentation about cancel culture and why it is so destructive, telling our country apart. Ellis told the Daily Wire that during his speech he mentioned how activists attempted to cancel the children's show Paw Patrol in light of the anti-police sentiment stemming from the Black Lives Matter movement. Following the death of George Floyd at the hands of the police, professors, activists, and journalists alike took to social media to decry why Paw Patrol was bad for reinforcing the idea that police are helpful. Ellis claims that his professor allotted a 10-minute question-answer session for students to respond to the presentation. Now, the professor took the designated time to scold Ellis for his views. Professors Now, court lifts ban on exporting blueprints for 3D printed ghost guns as Biden promised crackdown. Ninth Circuit panel on Tuesday lifted restrictions exporting blueprints on 3D printed guns. The ruling comes as the Biden administration has promised a crackdown on the so-called ghost guns, on any homemade firearm without a serial number. The divided Ninth Circuit panel lifted a court order against two Trump-era rules that make it easier to share blueprints for 3D printed guns. Courthouse News Service reported. Now, in July 2018, the Trump administration settled a lawsuit with defense distributor agreeing to remove 3D printed gun blueprints from the State Department's list of regulated munitions. Defense distributor released the specs online the following month, now notably making any efforts to block the dissemination of the files futile and therefore making Tuesday's ruling effectively redundant. The decision overturned an injunction issued by the U.S. District Judge Robert Lansnick. According to the Courthouse News Service, Lansnick has blocked two rules that transfer regulatory of 3D printed guns filed from the State Department to the Commerce Department. The rules also remove ghost guns and blueprints from the department list of munitions that require a license to export. 22 states, led by Washington State, sued to prevent the rule changes from taking effect. U.S. Circuit Judge Jay Bybee, a George W. Bush appointee, Ryan Nelson, Donald Trump appointee, found the courts lacked authority to review the challenged rule changes. The reporter said they found in 1976 law, the International Security Assistance of Arms Export Control Act, and its subsequent amendments forbid judicial review of State and Department decisions on what is considered a defense article subject to regulation. The U.S. Department of State, a Department of Commerce appealed the district court's order granting the motion of 22 states with the District of Columbia to enjoin DOS first final rule removing 3D printed guns and their associated files from the U.S. munitions list. Judge Nelson wrote, because Congress especially precluded review of the relevant agency actions, we have to vacate the injunction and remand with instruction to dismiss. Now, as reported by the Daily Wire, Beth Bowman, President Joe Biden announced early this month his intention to crack down on ghost guns, including homemade firearm kits. POTUS, though, demonstrated his ignorance about firearms and their current regulations. Biden, for instance, did not tell the American people what its homemade firearm kits and conflated the background check process for stripped lower receivers and ghost guns. Now, these are guns that are homemade, built from a kit, and include directions on how to finish the firearm. Now, you could go buy the kit, and there are no serial numbers, so they would show up the crime scene. They can't be traced. The president said buyers aren't required to pass a background check to buy the kit to make the gun. Consequently, anyone from the criminal to a terrorist can buy this kit, and in as little as 30 minutes put together a weapon. I want to see these kits threatened as firearms under the Gun Control Act, which is going to require the seller and manufacturer make the key parts with serial numbers and run the background checks on the buyer when they walk in to buy that package, added Biden. Bowman outlined some of the key facts Biden obfuscated from. Although the part kits can be purchased online, they are still missing the critical lower receiver. The person building the person building the firearm needs either a lower the machine himself or a ghost gun or strip lower receiver from a manufacturer without that piece. The parts kit is not functional. Strip lower receivers are treated as firearms under the Gun Control Act of 1968. Now, receivers are the key parts of a firearm. Biden is essentially calling for the regulation that already exists. Daily what? Okay, so the Supreme Court on Thursday ruled that the government must comply strictly with the requirement that immigrants receive detailed notices about their deportation hearings. An unusual coalition of Supreme Court justices joined Thursday to rule in favor of immigrant filing deportation in a case that the court said turned on the meaning of the shortest word A. By a 6-3 vote, the court sided with Augusto Niz Chavez, a Guatemalan immigrant who has been in the United States since 2005. 8 years later, he received a notice to appear at a deportation hearing, but this notice did not include a date or a time. 2 months after that, a second notice instructed him when and where to show up. By sending a notice of a deportation hearing, the government can stop the clock on immigrants hoping to show that they have been in the United States for at least 10 straight years. The 10-year mark makes it easier under federal law to ask to be allowed to remain in the country. Now, the court was deciding whether immigration officials had to include all the relevant information in a single notice. Justice Neil Gorsuch wrote in his majority opinion that they do criticizing the government's notice by installment. 2 other conservative justices, Clarence Thomas and Amy Coney Barrett, signed on as they did the court's 3 liberal members, Stephen Breyer, Elena Gant, Sonia Sotomayor. The case was argued in November during the Trump administration. Now, anyone who has applied for a passport, filed for the Social Security benefits, or saw a license understands the government affinity for forms. Make a mistake or skip a page. Go back and try again. Sometimes not with a penalty for that trouble. Now, but it turns out the federal government finds out some of these forms, and a 1996 immigration law specifies a notice to appear for the people the government wants to deport, Gorsuch said. At first blush, a notice to appear might seem to be just that, a single document containing all the information an individual needs to know about his removal hearing. But the government says supplying so much information in a single form is too taxing. It needs more flexibility, allowing its officials to provide information in separate mailings, as many as they wish, over time as long as they find convenient. He wrote, Gorsuch acknowledged, that a lot seemed to be hanging on one word. But he says the court role is to make sure the executive branch does not exceed the power Congress gave it. Interpreting the phrase notice to appear to require a single notice. Now, rather 2 or 20 documents does just that, he wrote. In dissent, Justin Brett Kavanaugh, an appointee of President Donald Trump, along with the Gorsuch and Barrett, called Gorsuch's conclusion rather perplexing as a matter of statutory interpretation and common sense. Kavanaugh pointed out that Nick Chavez had an adequate notice because he showed up at his hearing with a lawyer. Nick Chavez received a written notice of the charges and all of the required information, including the time and place of his hearing. Kavanaugh wrote an opinion that was joined by the Chief Justice Roberts and Justice Samuel Alito. Now, receiving the first notice without hearing date affords the non-citizen more time to prepare a defense, and the non-citizen suffers no prejudice from receiving notice in 2 documents, rather than 1, as Nick Chavez's case amply demonstrates, Kavanaugh wrote. It wasn't the first time the two former law clerks to now retired Justice Anthony Kennedy, an alumni of Georgetown Preparatory School in suburban Maryland, have been on opposite sides of a case. Now, last year, Gorsuch wrote the court's opinion that held law bars workplace discrimination against LGBTQ people. Now, Kavanaugh dissented. All right, so we're going to be going a short break, and we'll be right back. All right, welcome back to Best of News Podcast. So, a viral video. So, a viral video about Steve Harvey goes viral, trending on Twitter. So basically, in an interview, Harvey claims, all my friends are men. I don't have female friends. I don't. I'm capable of that. When Whitfield questions him on that statement, Harvey elaborates, well, I have a wife. I don't really have female friends because, okay, let's get rid of this myth right here. You're an attractive woman. There are some guys somewhere saying, yeah, we're friends. No, that's not true. Here's your friend. Only because you have made it absolutely clear that nothing else is happening except this friendship we have. He continues on saying, we remain your friends in hopes that one day there'll be a crack in the door, a chink in the armor, and trust and believe that guy that you think is just your buddy, he'll slide in that crack the moment he gets the opportunity because we're guys. Now, how is Trent, as the video has resurfaced, Trent has become this debate Harvey's bold claim that men are incapable of being friends with women. Trailer used at Elisini posted a TikTok of the interview that had gone viral with his comment saying, I only see women as sexual objects without saying it. Discreet with Harvey's comment saying, I have mad female friends that I want to. I've always made female friends, even back when I was being shot in the 2000s that I didn't want. And here, here's the clip. Now let's get a look at this clip.
I mean, it's a blessing, true enough, but really, it was just me sitting down being honest. All of my friends are men. I don't have female friends. I don't. I'm incapable of that.
Why? What do you mean?
Well, because, you know, come on.
Because you have a wife.
Well, I have a wife, and I don't really have female friends because, look, okay, let's get rid of this myth right here. Okay, I'm gonna tell you this. Let's get rid of this right here. You're an attractive woman. There's some guy somewhere saying, yeah, we're friends. No, that's not true. He's your friend only because you have made it absolutely clear that nothing else is happening except this friendship we have. We remain your friends in hopes that one day there'll be a crack in the door, a chink in the armor, and trust and believe that guy that you think is just your buddy, he will slide in that crack the moment he gets the opportunity. Because we're guys.
Most men think this way?
99.9% of us think that way. And you tell this to a woman and it just blows her back. No, I have male friends. You have male friends because they know it can be nothing else right now. I tell you what, all your male friends, just ask them in a friendly way. If I wanted to date you, would you be okay with that? And watch the fireworks. Watch.
All right, so looks like we're out of time, but we'll be back again 7:30 tomorrow. So we'll be back again. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe on this YouTube channel. So don't forget to like, comment, subscribe to my YouTube channel. Hit that notification button the next time I upload a video or I go live. So I'm going to be going live tomorrow at 7:30. I hope to see you in the next one. I hope you enjoyed this Bachelor News podcast. And this is Christian Bachelor.